Ma'am, people like you don't drive cars like this.
The sentence cracked the November air at the I-75 rest stop. Under buzzing lights, a silver Mercedes idled while Celeste Monroe set her empty coffee cup on the roof to free both hands. She had driven for hours with talk radio low, a habit from years of late returns from the Atlanta courthouse. A banner over the picnic tables read, "Be grateful, drive safe." He did not introduce himself. The flashlight found her face, slid to the keys, then raked the sedan's interior. "License and registration. Keep your hands where I can see them," he said, voice set for control rather than conversation. Celeste used the measured tone she kept for nervous jurors, telling him the wallet was in her coat and the registration in the glove box. "Slow," he warned. The beam climbed her cheekbones again, too close, as if the light could change who she was. A second cruiser rolled in, doors thumping, tires crushing fine gravel, the noise of authority arriving. Hanley circled to the passenger side where a garment bag lay across the seat. He eased the zipper and saw a black robe under dry cleaner plastic. "Nice costume, lady. Halloween's over." He lifted the bag with 2 fingers and let it fall. Theatrical. "Those are official garments," Celeste said. "Please do not handle them." "Official, huh? What are we playing at tonight?" Kincaid shifted. "Maybe we should run the plate again." Hanley waved him off. "I got a feel for this." He stepped into Celeste's space, guiding her wrist toward the hood. "For your safety and mine," he announced, already reaching for cuffs. Metal kissed bone. From the far side of the lot, an RV door opened. Earl Patterson, gray at the temples, whispered to his wife. "Marlene, start your camera." The phone chimed alive. Hanley looked past Celeste as if she were a reflection. "What do you do for work, ma'am?" "Public service," she answered. "In the courts." He chuckled. "Right. And I'm the president." He tightened the second cuff a notch too far. Celeste straightened despite the bite at her wrist. "You'll remember my name tomorrow, Officer Hanley." Kincaid's body camera blinked red, the small circle that meant it was recording. He tapped the unit to make sure. Hanley's stayed dark on his vest. Celeste asked for his name and badge number. He read her license like the setup to an old joke. "Celeste Monroe," he said. "This your Mercedes?" "It is," she answered. "Registered and insured in my name." The radio in the cruiser returned a clean plate and an active license. Hanley did not look toward the speaker. He looked at her shoes, at the emblem, at nothing that mattered. "Step away from the vehicle," when he said, "We are going to conduct a safety search." "For what cause?" Celeste asked. "You have my documents. You can verify everything." "For officer safety," he repeated. "Hands on the hood." She complied. The cold bled through her coat. Kincaid patted pockets, finding a pen, breath mints, a card case. Hanley took over with rougher hands, pressing along seams that needed no pressing. He opened the rear door and swept a flashlight through the cabin. The beam settled on a leather briefcase. "What's in the case?" "Court documents for tomorrow. Please do not remove anything." He popped the latches anyway. Inside, manila folders wore the blue embossed seal of the Superior Court. A printed calendar listed hearings and a holiday adjustment. Notes in a firm hand ran down the margins. Hanley riffled the papers as if counting counterfeit bills. "Impressive props," he said. "Where'd you buy the seal online?" "It is not a prop," Celeste said. "If you call your supervisor, this can end now." From the RV, Marlene whispered, "He's not listening." Her phone caught the soft click of chain and the higher click of a camera focusing. Earl shifted for a steadier angle. Traffic sighed on the interstate. Hanley snapped the briefcase shut and held it up like evidence. "See? People rehearse this stuff. Late at night, a fancy car and a story. That's how it goes." Kincaid glanced at Celeste. "Sir, the plate is clean. The license, too." "And my gut is cleaner," Hanley replied. "Ma'am, face the car. Spread your feet." The command landed like a stamp. Celeste did as told, cheek against cool metal, breath marking a small oval of fog. She thought of rooms that smelled of law books and lemon oil, of all the times she had asked officers to slow down and explain. She counted to 5, then 10, to keep anger from choosing her words. "Are you resisting?" he asked, though she had not moved. No, she said, I am breathing. Looks like resistance to me, he answered, and the cuffs cinched tighter by one notch. Cole, Kincaid said, barely a word at all. Celeste closed her eyes and pictured a courthouse clock, even marks around a quiet dial. The clock never shouted. It simply kept time until people noticed what hour it was. The lot thinned to a hush broken by radios and cooling engines. Hanley guided Celeste to the rear seat of the cruiser, one hand on her elbow, the other on the doorframe. The metal divider turned faces into geometry. She ducked to enter, careful not to scrape the hinge. Transport to county, Hanley called. Bag it and tag it. Kincaid nodded, eyes lingering a beat. Lights washed the asphalt in red and blue. The vending machines brightened and dimmed like distant windows. Earl steadied his phone on the RV window. He had driven rigs in every state, yet this quiet lot shook him. Marlene kept her voice small for the recording, as if speaking to their grandchildren. She is calm. They are not, she said. He has her briefcase. The cruiser idled while Hanley finished a form. A moth bumped the light bar and fell, then flew again. Kincaid wrapped the robe back into its plastic and slid it beside the briefcase in the trunk, shutting it softly. Inside the car, Celeste watched her breath fog the window, then clear. She set her shoulders and closed her eyes. She thought of the docket on her desk and of folders that would wait for morning unless someone scattered them for show. The thought tried to pull anger up her throat. She swallowed it down to where resolve lives. Hanley opened the door, stared up at stars he could not name. Let's be done with this, he said, sliding behind the wheel. The cruiser eased backward, tires crunching gravel, then rolled for the ramp. At the edge of the lot, a security camera kept its slow pan, a quiet witness. It caught the patrol car, the RV window, the flash of plastic. A trucker coughed. A coffee machine sighed. Earl lowered his phone. Did you get it? I think so, Marlene said, tapping to save. She checked the timestamp and then the battery level. I wish I had asked her name. The cruiser's taillights pooled red, then thinned to lines as it turned away. The roar of the highway folded over the rest stop again. In the quiet that followed, the Pattersons listened to crickets fill the gaps that authority had left. Marlene replayed a clip. The picture held Celeste's profile in the back seat, proud even now. It caught a snatch of voice, low and even, the kind people trust when rooms are hot. Marlene pressed pause and looked toward the dark where the car had gone. Earl, she whispers, that woman said she's a judge. At 5:30 a.m., the hum of fluorescent lights fills the small booking room at Valdosta County Jail. Behind the counter, a young clerk murmurs, "We got ourselves a classy one tonight." In the holding cell sits Celeste Monroe, hands folded, eyes steady, a portrait of calm amid chaos. The air smells like disinfectant and stale coffee. A wall clock ticks above laminated posters about property rules. Celeste rests on a molded bench, breathing evenly while the night thins toward dawn. The clerk glances up now and then, more curious than cruel, as if the quiet woman might stand and start teaching a class on how to behave. Across the hall, a copier warms to life with a clack, and a vending machine hums to fill the silence. Sergeant Linda Chavez steps through the metal door with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a paper cup in the other. Her uniform is neat, hair pinned back tight. She reads the intake sheet, then looks at the woman behind the bars. Not at the handcuffs, not at the car, but at the person. Name? She asks, though she can read it. Celeste Monroe, comes the answer, steady and low. Chavez nods and studies the driver's license, then the small card with a raised seal that sits in a clear evidence bag. The seal catches the fluorescent light. She turns it in her hand once, then twice. You said courts, Chavez says. Yes, Celeste answers. I serve the public there. She does not add more, not yet. The clerk hands over a manila envelope with property listed in neat rows. Coat, wallet, phone, briefcase, garment bag. Chavez reads the last two aloud under her breath. Briefcase, garment bag. She looks up, expression unreadable. Anyone bother to verify? The clerk shrugs, trying to keep distance from a growing unease. A quiet lot, a calm woman, a stack of official papers. She could feel the story wanting to make sense. Chavez sets the cup aside and takes a seat at a terminal. Her fingers move with habit, calluses clicking on keys, navigating to a state database. She enters the name, county, and the number that sits under the raised seal. The screen hangs for a beat, then resolves into a photograph and a line of text. Chavez leans closer and exhales through her nose, the sound more relief than surprise. She prints the page and checks the photo against the face in the cell. Same eyes, same set of the mouth that says, "I will wait for the truth." She stands, signals the clerk, and unlocks the cell. "Ms. Monroe, would you come with me, please?" That Ms. lands with care, a small repair in a long night. Celeste rises and follows to the desk. "I need to confirm a few items, then we will return your property." Chavez keeps her voice level. She does not look toward the intake line where a second form bears a familiar signature in tight letters. Officer Cole Hanley. The pen strokes already feel defensive. Chavez lays the printout beside the evidence bag and turns the badge camera monitor toward herself, hitting rewind to an earlier frame. "Walk me through why she's here," she says to the room. "Not to accuse, but because processes need reasons." The young clerk repeats the basics, reading from the sheet, while Chavez dials dispatch with a code that means verify identity at a higher clearance. A beep, then a voice on the line. The answer comes crisp. Active judicial officer, Fulton County. Photo and seal match. Recent calendar includes a holiday docket. Chavez thanks the voice and hangs up. She looks to the clerk. "Open a release packet." At the counter, the rubber stamp thumps the word release on a line that should never have been filled. Celeste watches the motion, the ink, the stamping, and allows her hands to unclasp. "Thank you," she says. Chavez nods. "Your patience did more work than any argument." She lowers her voice. "You should not have had to be patient." In the property room, a deputy retrieves the briefcase and the garment bag. The black robe inside gleams under plastic, the kind of fabric made for ceremony and restraint. Chavez signals care with every movement. "We kept these secure," she says. "Please check that nothing is missing." Celeste opens the case, skims the tabs, and touches the blue seals on the folders one by one. They are all there. She closes the latches gently, as if returning a book to the right shelf. Out front, the sun begins to rinse color into the eastern windows. A janitor pushes a mop bucket past, whistling a hymn under his breath. The clerk brings a clipboard to sign for the property and mumbles, "I'm sorry for the way this went." Celeste signs, meeting his eyes long enough for the words to land and stay. "I accept your apology," she says, "and I hope you will ask this question next time. What is the cause?" In a parking lot 2 counties away, Earl and Marlene sit in their RV with a charger cable snaking to a phone that blinks a progress bar. Marlene chooses a title she hopes will be plain enough to cut through noise. "Black woman arrested at rest stop for driving nice car." Earl thinks it could use fewer words. She nods and trims. They add the location, the hour, and a note that the woman stayed calm while the officer did not. Marlene taps a upload. The bar crawls, then leaps. Comments appear in clusters, some disbelieving, some weary, many saying they have seen this before. The morning news ticker at a local station begins to scroll the headline. Back at the jail, Chavez walks Celeste to the outer doors. The light is kinder than the fluorescence. "Your Honor," she says at last, choosing to use the title because the truth has been checked and verified. "This department owes you more than an apology." Celeste inclines her head. "What you did in there was the beginning of that." Chavez opens the door. Cold air moves in like a new paragraph. 3 reporters with badges on lanyards drift toward the steps as word moves faster than any schedule. A cameraman steadies his shoulder rig. A microphone with a station logo floats near but not too close. Voices stack, then untangle into a single request. Would she like to say anything? Celeste sets the briefcase on the top step and takes in the faces, the worry and the anger and the curiosity. She understands what a soundbite can do and what it can ruin. She thinks of juries who need clear sentences that do not raise the temperature. Then she speaks in the same tone she uses to mark the beginning of court. "Justice doesn't need anger to speak." The words settle over the steps like a blanket. A shutter clicks. A pen scratches. She does not add a second line because one will do. She thanks the officers who open the door and starts toward the lot where a friend from the courthouse will soon pull up in a beige sedan. The morning smells like wet concrete and the faint sugar of a donut box forgotten on a squad car roof. A church bell far away keeps the hour. Inside the hallway, Chavez watches the crowd thin and breathes, then returns to her desk to finalize the release in the system. She flags the intake for review and pins a note that lists the codes she used to verify. It is a record that will matter later when people argue about what was known and when. She sips cold coffee and winces. The janitor pushes the bucket past again and gives a small nod of respect that says more than words. Across town, the first segment of a local morning show runs the RV video in a split screen beside a map of I-75. The anchor does the careful voice reserved for difficult stories. Multi-year public servant. No charge filed. Investigation pending. A phone on a diner counter lights up with the clip. A waitress leans toward it during a lull, mouth tightening as the scene plays. When a customer asks for more coffee, she pours without looking away. Her tip jar reads, "Give thanks." Inside the precinct, Hanley watches the video go viral on his phone. The comments scroll fast. "This woman's a judge!" His hand trembles as Captain Lattimore calls, "Officer Hanley, my office, now." The precinct was silent except for the hum of computers and the faint smell of burned coffee. Morning light came thin through the blinds, slicing across the floor in narrow gold bars. Officer Cole Hanley sat at his desk, staring at the pause frame of the video that had exploded overnight, his own face caught mid-shout, his hand gripping Celeste Monroe's arm, her expression calm as stone. Every few seconds, the playback bar looped the same moment. Pause. Play. Pause again. His throat burned as if the echo of his own words still hung in the air. "People like you don't drive cars like this." He rubbed a hand over his face, but the skin under his fingers felt no cleaner. The squad room door opened and closed, slow and deliberate. Captain Ray Lattimore's steps crossed the tiles, stopping short of Hanley's desk. "You know why you're here," Lattimore said. His voice was measured, tired, not loud. "The whole county knows." Hanley looked up, his mouth opening to form an excuse, but Lattimore cut him off. "Not one word. You sit there and think about the fact that she was Honorable Celeste Monroe, presiding judge of Fulton County Superior Court. You put her in cuffs like a thief." Hanley's eyes widened. "She didn't identify herself." "She didn't have to," Lattimore replied. "You had a badge. You had eyes. You chose not to use either. Right." He set a printed report on the desk. The header read, "Administrative hearing, officer conduct pending investigation." The words bled through the paper as if already permanent. "Effective immediately, you're suspended with pay until review. Internal Affairs will call you in before noon. Turn in your badge and firearm. Asur." The words landed like gravel. Hanley unclipped his badge with slow fingers, laying it on the desk beside his phone. His gun followed with a hollow sound against wood. He stared at them, two symbols that had once defined him. "I made a mistake," he whispered. Lattimore's sigh was long and quiet. "A mistake ends when you own it. You're not there yet." As Hanley walked out, cameras flashed from the sidewalk. Reporters crowded the steps, voices rising. "Officer Hanley, did you know who she was? Do you regret your actions?" He kept his head down, the collar of his uniform biting into his neck. The hallway outside the captain's office felt narrow, like the walls themselves were angry. When he reached the parking lot, a paper cup rolled across the asphalt and stopped against his boot. He looked up, saw Kincaid leaning on the hood of his car, face pale. "She didn't deserve that," Kincaid said. Hanley's jaw clenched. "You think I don't know that now?" Kincaid shook his head. "Knowing late isn't the same as knowing right." At the courthouse, news crews lined the marble steps, waiting for confirmation that Judge Celeste Monroe would indeed preside over the disciplinary hearing for the officers who had detained her. Inside, the corridors buzzed with the low current of rumor. Secretaries whispered over coffee carts, and a security guard adjusted his tie twice before greeting her. When she entered, she wore the same black robe Hanley had once mocked, the fabric moving with quiet authority. Her expression carried neither pride nor anger, only gravity. Naomi Monroe stood waiting outside her mother's chambers, a folder tucked against her chest. "They asked if you're sure you want to handle this personally," Naomi said softly. Celeste offered a faint smile. "If not me, then who? Justice cannot hide from discomfort." She adjusted the sleeves of her robe, looked through the glass toward the small crowd beyond security, then turned back to her daughter. "I need you to stay calm. Let the record show restraint." Down the hallway, a familiar face appeared, Sergeant Chavez in her pressed uniform. "Your Honor," she greeted, her tone formal but warm. "Internal Affairs confirmed the hearing will convene this afternoon. Both officers have been notified." Celeste nodded. "Thank you for how you handled the morning. You made a difference before the world was watching." Chavez inclined her head, then stepped aside as reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. The hearing room filled quickly. Journalists filled the benches normally reserved for observers, their pens poised, microphones clipped to lapels. A county seal gleamed behind the bench. When Celeste took her seat, silence spread like a tide. The clerk read the first name, Officer Cole Hanley. The doors opened, and Hanley entered, no longer in uniform but in a pressed gray suit that looked heavier than any gear. His eyes darted once toward the bench, then fell. Behind him, Kincaid followed, shoulders hunched. Celeste glanced over the file before her. The documents contained transcripts, video timestamps, and witness statements, all neatly ordered. Her voice carried evenly. "These proceedings concern alleged misconduct and violation of civil procedure." She paused, letting the words rest. "All statements are under oath." Hanley swallowed hard. "Your Honor, His voice cracked. "I didn't know," Celeste held up a hand. "We will get to your explanation in due time, Officer Hanley. For now, the facts will speak first." She turned slightly to the projector screen as the first video clip began to play. The rest stopped. The cold light, her own voice calm against his barked commands. The audience watched in collective stillness, broken only by the faint squeak of a chair and a gasp when the handcuffs appeared. Naomi stood near the back, watching her mother's stillness, her control, her refusal to glare. It was a kind of power that did not raise its voice. By late afternoon, the hearing neared its conclusion. The air inside the courtroom felt heavy with the mixture of shame and revelation. Hanley's statements had dwindled to silence. Each replayed clip erased a layer of defense. Kincaid had admitted failure to intervene. Chavez provided her report, steady and factual, confirming that the woman they arrested was fully identified as a Superior Court judge within minutes of booking. The record was undeniable. Celeste leaned forward slightly, folding her hands. "The law protects citizens regardless of position or color," she began. "Yet prejudice does not vanish because it is silent. It waits for fear or arrogance to give it voice." Hanley looked up, eyes glassy. "I didn't mean for it to—" She stopped him gently. "Intent does not erase harm." The words came quiet, but they filled every corner of the room. Cameras clicked, recording the moment. Outside, people watched through the courthouse glass, faces reflecting disbelief and a strange hope that justice could look like composure instead of fury. Celeste reached for the file stamped with red ink. "Recommendation. Disciplinary action. The department will decide the specific penalties. My duty here is to affirm accountability." She closed the folder. "Officer Hanley, Officer Kincaid, you will both receive letters detailing the outcome. I suggest you read them, not as punishment, but as instruction." When she rose, the crowd also stood. The sound of benches scraping became its own kind of respect. Hanley stood too, unsure whether to bow or look away. His voice barely carried. "Your Honor, I'm sorry." Celeste met his eyes. "Then prove it where it counts outside this room." She left through the side door, her robe brushing against the wood like a whispered goodbye. Naomi joined her in the corridor, carrying her briefcase. "You didn't raise your voice once," Naomi said. "Sometimes silence is louder," Celeste replied. Down the hall, the press surged toward the double doors, microphones lifted. Inside, Hanley remained frozen, staring at the empty bench. The last words of the hearing echoed in his head, every syllable carving deeper than any sentence a judge could give. In the hallway, a stray paper from the docket floated to the floor, a printed memo noting the next day's proceedings. Its title read simply, "Reform Committee Hearing Conduct and Community Trust." Celeste's name appeared again, this time as chair. Thanksgiving morning broke cold and pale over Atlanta. The streets near the courthouse slick with dew and lined with early traffic. Church bells from Peachtree rang a soft quarter hour as Judge Celeste Monroe stepped through the marble entry, her robe catching the thin sunlight. Inside, every hallway hummed with restrained expectation. Reporters murmured into microphones. Officers in plain clothes stood by walls, and somewhere a janitor paused his mop to listen to a radio newscast repeating the same headline. The judge once arrested will preside over today's disciplinary hearing. In chambers, Naomi adjusted her mother's chair and set a cup of herbal tea on the desk. "You could have postponed this till after the holiday," she said. Celeste smiled faintly. "Justice doesn't take holidays, darling." She looked through the tall windows toward the square, where families carried pies and coffee thermoses, unaware that history was about to turn inside this building. "Let's begin." At 10 o'clock sharp, Captain Lattimore entered with a small team of internal affairs officers. Chavez followed, carrying a folder thicker than before. Two cameras from national networks took their place along the back wall, cords snaking across marble. The air felt like a held breath. Hanley walked in, civilian suit pressed, tie slightly off-center, eyes bloodshot. Behind him came Kincaid, quieter, shoulders folded forward. Their seats faced the bench. A murmur rippled through the spectators, some angry, some curious, most hushed. The bailiff announced, "All rise." Celeste's gavel came down once. "These proceedings will address the actions of Officers Cole Hanley and Brent Kincaid relating to the unlawful detention of a citizen on November 22nd. Her tone was level, clear, carrying no bitterness. "We will begin with testimony." Hanley's attorney rose, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, we ask leniency on grounds of misidentification." Celeste fixed him with a steady look. "The camera did not misidentify anyone, Counselor. It saw what happened." The attorney sat. The first witness, Chavez, described step by step the night of the arrest. Each line landed heavier than the last. Unverified suspicion, lack of probable cause, verbal disrespect. The audience shifted uneasily. When Celeste asked if departmental policy had been followed, Chavez's answer came sharp and sure. "No, Your Honor, it was not." The words cracked the room's stillness like dry wood. Hanley's jaw tightened. Kincaid lowered his gaze. Outside, wind brushed flags on the courthouse steps. Inside, justice was quietly taking form. During the recess, Celeste stepped into the anteroom for a brief moment of silence. The hallway outside was lined with spectators whispering to one another, half in disbelief that a woman who had spent the night in cuffs now sat on the bench. She leaned against the window frame and looked down to the square. A small parade had begun, local veterans carrying banners that read, "Thanksgiving for Freedom." Children waved paper flags. For an instant, her chest tightened with the weight of what this day meant and how fragile dignity could be. Naomi entered quietly. "Mom, there's press everywhere. They're calling it the Thanksgiving hearing." Celeste's eyes stayed on the window. "Then let them remember what gratitude is supposed to mean." When court reconvened, Hanley was called to speak. He stood, his voice brittle. "Your Honor, I had a feeling that night. I thought something was off. The car, the time." Celeste interrupted softly. "You thought a story fit a stereotype." He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. And what did it cost you?" He hesitated. "My job. My name." "No," she said, leaning forward, voice low. "It cost trust, the most fragile currency in law." A rustle spread through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Chavez's eyes glistened. Even Kincaid's breathing slowed, the weight of those words sinking deep. Celeste continued, "When you look at me, Officer Hanley, you do not see color first. You see a citizen whose rights you swore to protect. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice breaking. Celeste nodded once. "Understanding is a start. Integrity must follow." The silence afterward felt cleansing, not empty. Outside, the church bells began another quarter hour. The bailiff entered with a paper. "Your Honor, the recommendation from Internal Affairs has been delivered." Celeste accepted the envelope but did not open it. She rested it on the bench. "We'll finish before we read verdicts. There's something the public must hear." She turned toward the cameras, addressing not the officers, but the town beyond those lenses. "Prejudice is not a wound time heals. It's one we clean by facing the dirt of it." Her words floated over the courtroom, steady as prayer. The final hour of the hearing unfolded like the quiet of a storm after it has already passed. Celeste opened the envelope at last, reading the decision in measured tones. Both officers suspended pending retraining and reassignment to community outreach. A few gasps scattered through the benches, not for leniency, but for surprise. Mercy had entered the record. Hanley closed his eyes as she continued. This ruling does not erase what occurred, but it ensures that ignorance cannot hide behind a badge again. She signed the final document, her pen scratching softly. The clerk took the papers, stamping them with the county seal. Then Celeste rose from the bench, robe falling in calm folds. "We are adjourned," she said. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Reporters rushed forward. Flashes burst like sparks. Celeste moved past them toward the courthouse steps, where sunlight had turned the marble warm. People outside began to applaud, unsure if it was permitted in such a solemn place, then louder as she stepped into the light. The applause carried through the square, mingling with the faint smell of roasted chestnuts and the sound of a marching band from a nearby street. Naomi waited at the base of the stairs, eyes glistening. "You could have ended him," she said. Celeste shook her head. "I'd rather repair him." Hanley emerged moments later, shoulders stiff, the world's eyes following. He stopped halfway down the steps, seeing her speaking quietly to a child who had brought flowers from the crowd. Their petals brushed against the black of her robe, white and red, symbols of peace and reckoning. He wanted to approach, to speak, but words jammed behind the weight of shame. Instead, he stood still, watching her hand the bouquet to the little girl beside her, and smile faintly. At that instant, Chavez placed a hand on Hanley's arm. "Take this moment," she murmured. "It's the sound of grace." Above them, the courthouse flag caught the wind, snapping sharp against the blue. Cameras clicked, bells told noon, and the scene froze in collective breath, the woman once bound now standing free, the man once proud learning to bow his head. In the hush before dispersal, a reporter whispered to her cameraman, "History just gave thanks." By evening, the courthouse steps were empty, except for wilted flowers and a folded news leaflet fluttering against the stone. The Thanksgiving sun was sinking behind Atlanta's skyline, washing everything in amber. Celeste Monroe sat alone in her small kitchen, still in her robe, a faint line of fatigue tracing her eyes. On the counter, the tea Naomi had made that morning sat untouched. From the street below came the sound of children laughing, carrying pies and foil trays, the smell of nutmeg and roasted turkey hanging in the air. It was the first quiet she'd had in 2 days. Naomi appeared in the doorway, holding a plate of sweet potatoes. "You didn't eat lunch?" Celeste smiled, soft but tired. "Justice is a full meal by itself." Naomi rolled her eyes. "Mom, even justice needs carbs." They both laughed, the first shared sound of relief since the hearing began. A knock at the door interrupted them. Outside stood Linda Chavez, holding a small white envelope in a paper bag. "I didn't want to intrude," she said, "but I thought you might appreciate leftovers from the department's dinner." Celeste invited her in. The bag held cornbread, cranberry sauce, and a handwritten card. "To those who remind us what honor means." Celeste read the line twice before setting it down. "Sit," she said. "We have room." Naomi fetched another plate. Chavez looked hesitant. "I'm still in uniform." "So am I," Celeste replied, glancing at her robe. They laughed softly. As the three women ate, conversation drifted towards simple things, recipes, holiday memories, people they missed. No cameras, no microphones, only the warmth of a shared table. Across town, Earl and Marlene Patterson watched the evening news from their RV parked by a lakeside lot. The anchor's voice was calm. Today, Judge Celeste Monroe presided over the hearing of 2 officers who wrongfully arrested her. The case has ended not with punishment alone, but with reform. Earl muted the TV. "You think she'll ever know we filmed that?" Marlene smiled. "She doesn't need to. The world already saw." Outside, the lake reflected faint fireworks from a distant neighborhood, red, gold, then fading. In the kitchen, Naomi raised her glass. "To grace," she said. Celeste echoed, "To accountability." Chavez added quietly, "To beginnings." They clinked, the sound small and clean. Later that night, Celeste walked onto her porch with a shawl around her shoulders. The neighborhood was lit by porch lights and the orange flicker of candles in windows. Across the street, a family sang hymns before dinner. Their voices rose and fell in gentle harmony. We gathered together to ask the Lord's blessing. Celeste let the melody wash over her, the kind of old tune that stitched people together, even after arguments or loss. She thought of Hanley, how he'd stood frozen on the courthouse steps, and wondered what it meant to truly forgive. The law could assign discipline, but only people could assign meaning. She pulled the shawl tighter and looked at the horizon, where the last streaks of daylight met the city glow. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere bells chimed 8:30. The door creaked open behind her. Naomi stepped out, holding 2 cups of cider. "You're thinking again," she teased. Celeste accepted the cup. "I was remembering," she said. "That's different." Naomi leaned on the railing beside her. "You did something rare today, Mom. You made justice feel human." Celeste smiled faintly. "Justice is human. We just forget that sometimes." They sipped in silence for a while. A police cruiser rolled slowly past at the corner, not in haste but on patrol, windows down, radio low. The officer inside nodded when he recognized her house. Celeste returned the gesture, a quiet exchange of acknowledgement between authority and conscience. A phone buzzed inside a message alert. Naomi fetched it and handed it over. The sender name read Brent Kincaid. The text said, "Your Honor, thank you for giving me a chance to learn instead of hate. I've requested transfer to community service outreach. I hope to do better." Celeste read it twice. "He's trying," Naomi said softly. "Yes," Celeste replied, "and that's where change begins, in the trying." Shiram. She set the phone on the porch rail, looked up at the moon lifting pale and patient over the rooftops. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'll write him back." Far across town, Hanley sat alone in his small apartment, blinds half closed, dinner untouched on a tray. The television flickered with reruns and faint static. He stared at the paper letter folded on the coffee table, department suspension and reassignment notice. His badge lay beside it, cold under the lamplight. For hours he had tried to read the words without the weight of humiliation pressing on his chest. Now, as the city quieted under holiday night, he unfolded the paper again. At the bottom was a handwritten note, not typed 3 simple words. "Do better, Cole." No signature, but he knew the handwriting. He let out a slow breath and looked toward the dark window, where his reflection blurred into the streetlights outside. Somewhere in that reflection he saw the woman in the black robe, standing taller than any punishment could make her. He picked up his phone and typed a draft of an email he might never send. "Your Honor, I understand now that control isn't the same as respect. I'm sorry for both what I did and what I failed to see." He didn't hit send. He just stared at it until his eyes burned. Downstairs, a child's laughter echoed in the corridor as neighbors returned from dinner. Someone knocked gently on his door, his mother, carrying a foil tray of turkey. "You need to eat," she said. Hanley managed a small nod. "I will." When she left, he sat again, hands folded. The smell of stuffing and cranberry filled the air, homely and forgiving. He whispered into the quiet, almost a prayer. "Do better." Outside, fireworks cracked faintly above the skyline. The sound traveled all the way to the quiet streets near Celeste's home, where she sat at her desk writing by hand, 1 letter to the precinct, 1 to the reform board, and 1 more without an address, beginning with "Dear Officer Hanley." The pen moved slowly, each word a measure of compassion and resolve. She ended it simply. "The system is not healed by punishment, but by those who dare to grow." She folded the letter, set it beside the lamp, and looked out into the night where the city glowed, not perfect, but still worth believing in. The first week of December arrived with low-gray clouds and the smell of pine wreaths on courthouse doors. Downtown Atlanta shimmered with early Christmas lights. Shop windows glowed gold behind misted glass. Inside her office, Judge Celeste Monroe sat at her desk surrounded by letters. Some official, most handwritten. They came from strangers, colleagues, and citizens across the state. Words of gratitude, shame, reflection. She opened each one carefully, reading every line. One envelope, smaller than the rest, bore no return address. The handwriting was awkward but deliberate. Your Honor, I attended the mandatory community class today. I listened instead of talking. You were right. Prejudice hides behind pride. I'm working on both. Cole Hanley. Celeste folded the letter and pressed it flat. No bitterness rose in her chest, only quiet understanding. She placed it in a drawer labeled Change. Outside her window, the city's park was dressed with garlands, the fountain rim dusted with frost. Children tugged mittens onto smaller hands while parents took photos by the tall spruce. Celeste stepped out from chambers, her robe replaced by a wool coat, and walked to the rotunda where the county's reform committee would meet for the first time. Reporters lined the corridor again, but this time they were calmer, pens ready for policy, not scandal. Chavez stood near the entrance, offering a reassuring nod. Big day, she said. Bigger purpose, Celeste replied. Inside, nameplates gleamed on the table. Community Oversight Board, public session. The agenda bore her signature. As the meeting began, Celeste addressed the crowd. We cannot legislate compassion, but we can build systems that leave it room to grow. What happened in November showed us how thin the wall is between power and abuse, and how necessary humility is in every uniform, every office, every title. Her voice carried steady warmth, filling the room without strain. Today we start not with punishment, but with partnership. Applause followed, gentle but persistent. In the back, Naomi filmed on her phone, capturing the moment not for the internet, but for history. Celeste glanced toward her and smiled. It was the first time in weeks her shoulders seemed to rest. That afternoon, sunlight slanted through the courthouse atrium as the new reform committee signed its founding charter. Chavez added her name beneath Celeste's, followed by Captain Lattimore and 2 city council members. Each pen stroke felt like a promise, ink marking more than words. Celeste's robe hung on the back of a chair beside her, a silent witness to the transformation from conflict to collaboration. During the recess, Naomi handed her a newspaper. The front page headline read, From Victim to Visionary, Judge Monroe Leads Change After Viral Arrest. Below the headline, a photo captured her leaving the courthouse on Thanksgiving, robe fluttering in the light. Celeste frowned slightly. Visionary, she murmured. That's too generous. Naomi smiled. It's accurate. Through the glass wall, Celeste could see a group of recruits from the police academy walking across the plaza, escorted by their training officer, none other than Brent Kincaid. He wore no weapon, only a clipboard and an attentive expression. He stopped near the steps, gesturing toward the courthouse flag. His voice carried faintly through the glass. That's the building where we remember that authority means service. The cadets nodded. Celeste watched the scene unfold with a calm pride that felt new, lighter. Chavez joined her at the window. He's good with them, she said. He found the right place. Celeste nodded. Some lessons only come after we're broken open. As the meeting adjourned, Celeste gathered her papers. A small crowd waited near the exit, not journalists, but citizens from the community. A pastor, a retired teacher, a young barista who had shared the video months earlier. They offered quiet words of thanks. One woman pressed a folded church bulletin into her hand. Inside was a verse handwritten in blue ink. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Celeste folded it carefully and tucked it into her coat pocket beside Hanley's letter. 2 reminders, one of failure, one of grace, resting side by side. That night, the courthouse lights dimmed, except for the Christmas tree glowing in the main hall. Celeste stood by the fountain outside where the wind carried faint carols from the nearby church. A few steps away, a man approached slowly, hat in hand, Cole Hanley. His posture was humble, almost uncertain. Your Honor, he said, voice low. I didn't plan to disturb you. I just wanted to deliver this. He held out a sealed envelope. She accepted it, but didn't open it yet. You've already said enough with your letter. This one isn't about me, he replied. It's about the department. We've started a mentorship program for new recruits, diversity, community communication. It's your idea, really. Celeste regarded him for a long moment, seeing not the man who had once humiliated her, but someone trying to rebuild from the wreckage of his own blindness. Then that is how redemption looks, she said. Hanley nodded. I still wake up thinking about that night. So do I, Celeste admitted, but now it serves a different purpose. They stood in silence as snow began to drift light, hesitant flakes melting on contact with the stone fountain. The courthouse behind them glowed warm through its high windows. Hanley glanced up. Thank you for not ruining me. I didn't save you, Celeste replied. You chose to listen. He tipped his hat, then walked away, his figure dissolving into the shimmer of streetlight and flurries. Celeste opened the envelope after he left. Inside was a simple printed proposal titled, Bridge Initiative Building Respect in Diverse Georgia Environments. Her eyes filled, not from sadness, but from the quiet joy of completion. She turned toward the fountain and dropped a penny into the still water, watching the ripples widen until they touched the edge. Naomi's voice called from behind her. Ready to go home? Yes, Celeste said, looking up at the sky now sprinkled with stars. Let's go home. They walked together through the park where the city lights shimmered like promises kept. Behind them, the courthouse clock struck 9, not an ending, but the steady mark of time moving forward. In the hush of winter's evening, the story of Judge Celeste Monroe settled into the heart of her town like a quiet hymn. What began as an act of prejudice became a lesson in humility, proving that true justice does not shout, it listens. Those who once stood above learned to bow, and those who were underestimated rose not in vengeance but in grace. For every person who watched, the message endured. Dignity belongs to all, and respect is where law and mercy finally meet.